Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I've got Andrea in. Can you hear me? I don't know why people are so excited. This is hilarious. I love it. People getting excited about totally nerd stuff. Andrea, everybody knows Andrea. And maybe not everybody knows that I'm actually an Andrea technically. Not dueling Andreas, I think like Andreas for the win. But people that are coming in don't know who I am. I'm a journalist. I've been doing this for a million years. I've kind of transitioned out of journalism per se, because again, I've been doing it for 100 years. And I got really interested in sort of the some of the aspects of reporting that was being done by lawyers on LawTube for especially Delphi. And I stumbled across, as many of you have, Andrea Burkhart, who is giving it to you straight. And I think that the refrain that I heard, and I'm going to bring her on actually, because I think I'd like to get her perspective on as a journalist and as a lawyer who's working to kind of illuminate the criminal legal system or the criminal justice system, and me as a journalist trying to educate people on what journalists do versus what we don't do. So I'm going to bring Andrea up. Hello.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation.
I know. It was like we started talking backstage. I'm like, well, I guess maybe we should just put a lid on it until
we're gonna say all the good stuff before anybody's even here.
So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I was I've been very interested in kind of semi-stalking you a little bit on Twitter, which I don't go on much, but yeah, about journalism and about the difficulty and some of the alarms that you are raising, Bob, lawyer Lee, especially during the Delphi trial, which I thought was very interesting. But I want, tell everybody who you are and all of that, and then we'll just jump right in.
Yeah, so I'm Andrea Burkhart. I'm a practicing attorney for almost 20 years now. We're getting very close. Mm-hmm. And primarily in criminal defense, most recently as an appellate practitioner, mostly a public defender as well. I get appointed to cases. I don't choose my clients. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a matter of personal preference, but there's all kinds of different models for how to practice. Mm-hmm. So in recent years, I have devoted more and more of my time to doing what I call legal color commentary. And I use this description a little bit tongue in cheek because I do want to be very clear. I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm not a journalist, not trying to be a journalist. That's not what I do. I kind of borrowed this expression from sportscasting, color commentary, because the whole idea is that you're somebody that's watching the action, you're calling the shots, but the color commentator is often like a former player or former coach or somebody like that. They have some kind of unique insight into what they're watching. And so maybe it's war stories, maybe it's the relationships between the people, maybe they understand the plays on a deeper level, that type of thing. And so they can just give you a little bit of a deeper understanding of what you're watching than just a normal action caller is going to be able to do, who's just describing, what's happening on the field. And you're kind of left to your own devices to figure out, well, what does that mean? Who's winning?
Right.
So the reason why I started doing this, I found there was an enormous appetite for it. I've had a lot of criticisms of legal journalism for many, many years, like really since I started paying attention to trials that were high profile, that were publicly reported. I just found it was very, very difficult to get accurate information about what was going on, and then particularly about the significance of what any of that meant. And so it wouldn't be uncommon to see a case where, it's reported as if things are going a certain way, and then maybe you get the verdict and it's completely unexpected, and the reporters just seem very confused about why that is. But then when I go in and kind of take a little bit of a closer look about, at kind of what was actually happening, it makes a lot more sense to me, because of that context. So that's really what I'm trying to do. I rely on journalism a lot to do what I do, because I'm not the person who's going out and acquiring the facts and getting the information. That was a very different situation for me in Delphi than I'm normally accustomed to, because usually I'm relying on watching the court hearing, reading the transcript, reading the motions, this direct sources of information, and not having to myself be the reporter of what is going on. So that was very much an experimental thing for me, combining that sort of fact reporting with the color commentary, the analysis, and the opinions and so forth about what's going on.
I really like the way that you describe it, because I think that, I used to be a huge Yankees fan, my husband and I, before they went absolutely, they were terrible. But you have like these old grizzled ball players giving you the inside scoop, and like, okay, I can believe them. They played first base for the Yankees for 100 years, whatever the case may be. So I really like that approach to it. And I think that, the point that you made, is that you don't consider yourself a journalist. You are very clear about, hey, I'm giving you the color commentary here. And this is, so I just have to mention, I think that I find it stunning that people that come to like, go to a defense attorney or somebody who is like me, an old school, like actual journalist, and think that they're going to get something that is different than what we have practiced. So it's like, they're not going to necessarily, I think I was reading a comment from somebody on Twitter, and they're like, oh, Andrea just talks about the defense. And I'm like, It's what you get on the tin.
It's always funny when I hear stuff like that, because yes, I do frequently talk about the defense, and I come to the practice of law from a defense background. I've never been a prosecutor. I don't really have a lot of I don't really relate to that sort of role in the process very well. So that is the perspective I have. I certainly don't make any bones about that. But I'm certainly not presenting cases from the standpoint of like the defense is always right. What that perspective gives me is an insight into why the defense is doing this type of thing, why they're making these types of arguments, the strategic reasons for it, how that might unfold down the road. And this is all just information that I know because I've been there. I've lived that experience for like I said, almost a couple decades now.
Right. And I think that that's valuable too, though, that you've also seen the inside process. And I think the one thing that, and this is funny. So I want to get into Delphi, but sort of how I came to it. And I'm very glad I didn't come to it until very late, because I didn't really have, well, I mean, given all I'm glad I'm involved in it now, because I do, my background is in investigative journalism. So what I do is very different than, say, you and I spoke a little bit about access journalism. So that's not journalism.
Yeah.
That's being a public mouthpiece. And
That's PR.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like, no, but so being able to bring that perspective from being inside and seeing the system as you do, it's not surprising to you or to some of the other law tubers, let's say. I don't know. That's what they're called. You call yourselves, or you've been called. I don't know, labels. But it's the being able to bring that to bear and see like people being shocked and like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is going the way it's going, right? That with Richard Allen, a lot of us were thinking, oh, certainly not. But for me, in my experience as an investigative journalist who has spent decades chasing and trying to keep power accountable, whether it's governments or whatever, people believe, like, if I do it, there, I think there's an analog here in that the time, the effort, the years sometimes it takes to put together a story, to do the FOIA requests that are almost like original actions, except with all the great legal writing, right, to get access to these things. People that read, say, then a 4,000 word story that I've done expect some sort of monumental change when I've exposed some wrongdoing. And it's like, are you kidding me? That almost never happens. But again, I think that that's the value in being able to kind of peel back what goes on behind the scenes. And I think, and I believe that for journalism very well as what everyone's doing with, covering the Richard Allen trial, especially with Gull cutting off all of the access, which is not, that is, it's just like full flight from reality. It was just bizarre.
Yeah, well, it's so problematic from so many different perspectives. I mean, obviously, we have a long and strong constitutional tradition in this country of public access to the courts. We are not ruled by our government. We rule the government ourselves. It belongs to us. People on my channel have heard me say many times I feel particularly strong about this when it comes to the courts, because the courts are where we directly do justice. We don't personally go into Congress and pass laws. We don't personally, go overseas and negotiate treaties. We have representatives do that for us. But in the courtroom, we sit on the jury and we make the decision. And so we are the ones that are directly responsible for the kinds of consequences that our fellow citizens experience. Right. So the quality of our ability to do that depends so much on the quality of the people that we do have representing us in that process. The judges, the prosecutors are, the ones that are most commonly elected. In some places you might elect a public defender, but not everywhere. And so to be able to really evaluate how are our courts functioning, we need to have that insight into the process. We need to understand what it's for and how it's supposed to function and what are the principles and the ideals that govern it. And then we need to see that playing out in practice so that we can gauge, is this adding up to what it's supposed to be? Is this how we want it to be? And if it's not, where do we need to make the change? Is the change we need to bring in a different participant? Or is the change something more structural? Like there's a law that needs to be changed. There's a court process that isn't fair. So it's just really a critical part of that government accountability function, to be able to be present, to observe what our courts are doing, and to pass judgment on it, to evaluate it and think about it for ourselves. So for the resistance, the overwhelming resistance and hostility to that interest that we saw in Delphi, it just struck me as fundamentally so un-American.
Yes.
This like monarchical kind of despotic, you will get the justice that I hand down and you will like it. And that's not at all what our system is supposed to be predicated on.
Right, exactly. And I think that, and that was one of my frustrations as a journalist. And I think that is, so, when I started watching Lawyerly, and it was Lawyerly, you and Bob Motta, because I would, because I couldn't go out and sit there, I wish I could have, because I would have, because that's me. I'm boots on the ground. I try to be whatever. But so I went to you three because you all had, and the notes and the perspective and all of those things. And I, that was a lifeline. And I've never experienced that. Right. So even the idea of, and I've got a bad feeling about Luigi Mangione's representation or, ability to have public information. But he's also still in the federal system, which is a whole other shit show. But 3 jurisdictions. But so when I started watching the Delphi stuff and I began to understand like, oh God, there's some, because it is un-American. It is to me as well, the place where, much like I believe journalism in the traditional sense, in the very, very traditional sense of what, from Brandenburg v. Hayes and, all of these things that laid out, sort of the news and being muckrakers of the past, Ida B. Wells, Sinclair Lewis, all of these things, right? That exposed wrongdoing and made change. I feel that very same way about what happens in a court of law. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is the place that I come from as a journalist. And when I heard, it was funny because I would hear you and Bob and Lawyer Lee, and then finally getting chastised by Andy Baldwin, do some journalism. And I'm like, hey, you know what? We don't have any journalism anymore. Guess what? So, but because and so that's when I was like, oh man, something's wrong here, that people don't believe that there is still true actual journalism, because it's like practically missing. It's practically missing from the rural landscape because it's been consolidated, etc. So I think that, when you and Bob and Lawyer Lee started talking about it, there's some bad actors, I believe, very adamantly, that there were some people that were doing the public or the prosecution and the state, not even the state, the government, let's get clear, right? The government's bidding from a sort of PR perspective. But having you all there was our window into it. So what was it? Was that your first kind of experience with like journalism? Because I mean, honestly, what you did was a form of journalism. I'm sorry.
I'll take your word for it. You're the expert, not me.
No, but I'm saying that, but I mean, if I had $1 for as much time as I spent sitting around watching like public hearings till my ears bleed to get that first, and so some of that is inherent in the kind of journalism I'm talking about versus infotainment. Or, I look at some journalists, like you probably look at Nancy Grace.
Yes.
I can imagine. And I'm going out on a limb saying you're maybe not a huge Nancy Grace fan, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, she did try to slander me, but other than that,
Oh my God, I'm totally. But so I'm trying to so I'm trying to show sort of analogs here. So when I hear people talk about journalists, or when people talk about lawyers and look at Nancy Grace, I'm like, oh, what? So, but anyway, back to Delphi and your experience on the ground, what led you there, and what you saw and experienced, including like all the turds in the punch bowl from like national, news magazines.
Yeah. Well, it was a wild experience. It was the first time I've ever had like a firsthand, interaction, really, definitely to that degree, with so many different media reporters and outlets, and everything from the local news to these national producers, and just all and the podcasts and everything, like all the different kind of attitudes and perspectives you got towards presenting the story of what was happening in this courtroom, and what are you messaging, what are you relying on to communicate that message. Seeing that variety right up close and personal was definitely a new experience for me. The whole reason I went to Delphi really was because of the lack of transparency. I had become interested in the case fairly early on, but it was just so difficult to get access to good information about it.
And when you say, I'm sorry. No, when
Yeah,
you
I
say
was.
early on, do you mean
Uh-huh.
like from the arrest, pre-arrest? Do you mean what point?
The first time I really remember the case kind of grabbing my attention was I had heard about the fact that the probable cause affidavit was
Ah,
sealed. And I
okay,
remember
yes,
thinking, "Oh,
yes,
that's
yes.
weird,
Right, right,
that's
right,
unusual. That doesn't
right.
usually happen." But I didn't really think much. I didn't really think much of it at that point. It just seemed like, oh, maybe that's a weird Indiana process and they'll let it go. Um, and then it was only later on, like when certainly the Franks motion got my attention because it was just so unusual. It was such an unexpected kind of turn of events of how this case might unfold, the type of information that was out there that seemed, just very unexpected. Certainly, if you were reading just the media reports, you weren't going to see anything about that. So it was a major left turn from kind of the general narrative that you were getting about that case in the mainstream. And then it was like watching the process unfold, um, and the hostility to the defense attorneys,
Mm.
the way that documents were being kept out of the public record, like all of these like 100 and some documents that never got indexed or reported or things like that had to go all the way up to the Indiana Supreme Court to get corrected. It just became very clear that this case was just unusually hard to get good information about. It was hard to get direct access to these court filings. They weren't available online, like through a
Right.
court website or something like that. So you'd have to kind of find somebody
Yeah,
who got
yeah.
them, and develop those kinds of networks and stuff like that. And so that took a little bit of time to figure out where those resources were. And then of course the lack of transparency in the hearings. The one time the cameras get allowed into that courtroom is the one time she's going to dress down the public defenders and try to humiliate and abuse them
Yeah,
for things that ultimately they were victims of.
I believe that
So,
too, 100%. Yeah, yeah,
oh yeah. So
totally.
it really caught my attention that I knew that there were a lot of people interested in this case. Of course there were. This was about the brutal murder of two young girls, as Mr. McClellan said in his opening statement. A lot of people are deeply concerned about that, and of course, and it went unsolved for all this long time, and people want to know what happened, and people want to know that the person who did it is going to be caught and is going to be brought to
Right,
justice. So I just knew it was going to be very difficult to get good accurate information about what was going on, given the lockdown
yeah,
that was just coming from all of these different angles. The podcast, I never really got too much into exploring those avenues other than Bob. I did listen to some of Bob to, get filled in on like
right,
what's
right,
happening in court hearings and stuff like that, since you don't know, they're not televised, or you can't get a transcript,
right.
all that type of thing. Uh, but because I was I've always been the sort of person who's like, I can form my own opinion,
Right.
I'm interested in just getting, give me the facts and let me try to make sense out of them. So I wasn't really interested in like these, just very, um, uh, just perspective based kind of accounts, these narrative accounts of what was happening, and the sleuthing, the theories and stuff like that. It's interesting, but it's just not what I do. It's not my avenue. And that's what I tended to find most of the true crime type of media was really focusing on.
Hmm.
So what I wanted was like a good journalist who would be able to go in and summarize, this is what's happening, know what the important details are so that they can spot those and tell me. And then based on that, I can do my own thinking with that information and think, wow, this is, looking really good for the state. This is looking really, really good for Mr. Allen. Here's, how this might play out on appeal, just the normal things that I
Yeah,
do when I comment on a case. But I knew that wasn't going to be available. So if it was going to happen, it was going to be up to me.
Mhm.
That's what makes you Delphi.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean but see that, I think you covered a few things about podcasts, etc., and the sleuthing community. I will say that one of my experiencing, and I think that I've got so many opinions which are separate and apart from fact. I think that I have found that what I can tell you about my experience, even in the last month since I started coming on here and yapping about some of my concerns about the crappy journalism, the lack thereof, that's coming out and continuing to at this point, I've got enough information to make a determination that there's, bad actors in the public media space doing some bad things, right? But what I do know as a journalist, to me, I'm used to people coming. So like
Mhm.
when you say sleuths, I think that to me those are, I rely on people to come to me with stuff. And
Yeah.
so I think that we're talking about maybe the same thing. I don't know. But for me, it's like when I came out on this and was like taking, certain outlets to task because I think they're agents of the state and should just become PR, outlets. But
Mhm.
people can't, I mean, people are just emailing me constantly, like, here's this information. What can we, and you have to
Mhm.
vet it. And I have to,
Mhm.
all of those things that go into, whether or not even some of it I can use or is beneficial. But so I'm interested once you did get to Delphi, because
Mhm.
obviously you hooked up with like Lawyer Lee and some
Mhm.
of these people,
Mhm.
that are invaluable, uh, versus the people that are just kind of in it to, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Maybe you do, but I'm just, I go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all have our different niche, and when I say that the sleuthing
Yeah.
kind of approach didn't necessarily interest me, it's not. I'm not in any way like diminishing that
Oh yeah.
as a practice or as a form of media. It's just that that's not my objective. My
Mm.
expertise, the value I feel that I bring to the commentary space is not in figuring out what actually happened.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
your comparison of the sleuthing kind of activity to like the original action, like a writ of habeas corpus or something like that, it's similar to doing it your independent investigation where you're out and you're fact gathering.
Right.
You're trying to figure out what sorts of pieces of evidence will support your proposition, what ones will undermine it. How do you deal with all of these things? And that all goes into formulating your perspective on what is the truth of this crime or this situation. And I'm not saying I don't do that. I think everybody, does that
Oh,
to some
absolutely.
extent
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
follow a crime. But that's just not. It's not really what my commentary is geared towards because I'm not. I don't think I'm any better than that than anybody else. And probably there's lots of people out there, some in your chat right now, are much better at that type of thing than I am. So mine really is more in the analytical world. It's
Right.
it's how to make sense out of it, in particularly given that what goes on in a courtroom, it's not entirely unrelated to the truth of what happens in the crime, but it could be a loose correlation.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's its own system of rules and processes and things like that. And so that's really the gap I feel like I'm trying to help people bridge is the difference between what is going on with the courtroom and what is an actual process of figuring out the truth of a particular event. Like those are not necessarily the same things. They operate under different rules and different parameters and so forth. And so I think that the journalism is such an interesting topic in how it relates to all of that because it is at least ostensibly, I think, supposed to be part of that truth finding truth finding function, but it's got a different set of rules than the court does, you know, and kind of just like the courtroom, you have people who are have more or less integrity when it comes to applying those rules to the type of product that they're creating. So it's a similar venture. But yeah, I do consider what I do very, very different for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I mean, and I think that is one of the most valuable things, like I was saying, without like your your notes from the trial. I mean, but the thing is like when and to me that's a public service, right? Yeah, you have a channel, and that's another thing I find hilarious is people talking about people doing law tube making money, right? It's like, oh, like it's like what? I'm sorry.
I notice that there is demand for my product and take steps to ensure I can increase the supply of what people want.
It's so funny because people use that against, like, you know, I mean, I've watched Bob and stuff, and he's sort of embraced it finally. He's like, yeah, I'm a defense shill. It's like, you know, he's like, okay, fine. But see, the thing is that I see that as, you know, and that's more about like, I think what I've seen happen to journalism as an actual industry, because one of the things that you spoke about earlier is that when you got really let down with legal journalism, and I mean, I'm thinking back to the days of like when every state major outlet, you know, I'm from Iowa, whether it was like the Des Moines Register, everybody had their newspaper, and every newspaper had enough of a deep pockets to keep people employed for 20 years to sit in courtrooms, that they were able then to at least acquire enough of the knowledge to understand what is going on and what is, you know, and still be able to present that. So, you know, that went poof quite a while.
Well, it did, and the whole market and the economy of information changed so much, obviously with the digital era. But I mean, I think even going back into just as soon as they started bringing cameras in the courtrooms, because part of the value to the news reporter that allowed them to be able to invest those kinds of resources is that exclusivity, the fact that it's difficult to get access to that information. So we're very reliant on them to be able to do it. And then that, you know, increases the value of what people will pay for that type of information. And that's just no longer the case when you can turn on Law and Crime and watch it for yourself. You don't need to hear what Channel 5 News, you know, is telling you happened in the courtroom. Just kind of by way of example. And then obviously the whole, you know, rise of social media and the social media reporting and commentary and so forth, it's just a whole other animal that has made the process of, it's made the practice of reporting facts less exclusive, but it's also made it less reliable. You know, it's a lot. You just got to be so much more cautious about your sources and who you rely on and who you give credibility. You know, we used to take it on faith that if you read it in the newspaper, it's been vetted. It's from somebody who is it's met certain standards for them to be able to publish that. And I think part of the challenge with the new media market is that those incentives have shifted so much. And so now there's just, you know, we still have the pressure to be exclusive, right? So you see things like in Delphi, the media is not going to go to bat for the public to get access to the exhibits. It doesn't benefit their interest for the public to get access to the exhibits, because then people will come and watch my YouTube channel instead of their news station to learn about the trial exhibits. And then the scoop, the being able to report it first, that is from my perspective, the cause of just often a massive amount of information that's out there, because, you got to be quick. You got to get it out there before somebody else gets it out there. That means you may not put the time and the effort into vetting the information as well as you might otherwise. We saw a lot of this in the very early days of the Koberger case when he was first arrested, and it was just an absolute frenzy. Everybody was trying to get something new, something unique, some kind of scoop that they could report about this case, because there's just such a massive amount of attention on it, and everybody wants to be able to capture a big chunk of that. So you only get that by being special and by having something that nobody else has. It's just distorted the incentives to such a degree that it is unfortunate. I think that the quality and the integrity of journalism have suffered. That's where I find it very ironic to have the kind of grifter, label me, because I'm just out here saying what I think, and it so happens that people find that valuable.
Right.
If you looked at it from the economic incentive, like it doesn't even make sense, right? There would be a vacuum for certain types of perspectives. Say for Karen Reed, there's a pretty large disparity when you look at like the law tube type of genre. A lot of lawyers have looked at that case. They all tend to come down, on one side, not 100%, but the overwhelming majority. Same thing happened with Depp versus Heard. And so you get this message, oh, you guys are all grifters. You're all cashing in on what people want to hear. Well, no, because there's going to be a market for that contrary perspective. And if you're the one who's going to be the one providing that, now you're exclusive. You have that whole other benefit to what you've been doing. So, the grifting would look very, very different in the YouTube genre than I think what you actually see.
I just find it so disingenuous by, and this, so I don't even know what it's called, right? Because the thing is, it's like there's creators, there's whatever people, as long as people do work that is, you tell people what you are. I'm a journalist. This is not necessarily journalism. This is two ladies having a conversation. But and when I do, it's like I tell people, it's like when I do a journalism, they'll know it. But
love it.
When I do it, you'll know it. But the thing is like it's just it just is so disingenuous of people to even bring that crap up, because it's like, please, I mean, come on, but that's one of the things that I think people use. At least because I'm brand new to this whole thing. I don't even know if this is going anywhere for me, frankly. Like I said, I was on my way out the door before the Delphi thing, and I was like, oh God. But it is accessible, right? So it's like, it's got that advantage of being accessible, interactive. I try to be open and, listen to all points of view, but my YouTube or my much like my Twitter stream is not a democracy, so it gives you that agency. But, I don't know if that's something I see that being so beneficial in my news and information gathering from like the Delphi perspective, like being able to see and being able to key in on those things that are absolutely wrong. And one of the things that's interesting you mentioned that makes me bristle is that, the local media in Indiana weren't going to go to bat for people to be able. That's not how it used to be, right? Like theoretically, journalism, again, going back 100. I feel like I'm my mom, like going back to my day, but it kind of was good journalism built on good journalism, right? And there was a collegiality that's gone. So I think it's me that, and I don't mean me as the only person, but I think it's me as an old school journalist trying to figure out how, how it seems LawTube is doing. You guys are
Mm-hmm.
doing that and putting your stake in the ground, and people can consume and see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that journalism has that kind of, it, it's been, I don't think people fundamentally understand it, much like people probably don't fundamentally understand that defense attorneys or, appellate counsel are actually that sort of stopgap, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that gap between you and the government. That used to be what journalism was, right? That
Yeah.
was the watchdog. So, but that's another thing too. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and I think part of the problem too is sort of like you were pointing out, is that it's not cost free to do journalism. It's not something that you can just pump it out really quickly and
Yeah.
get some quick returns. It's capital heavy, so there are barriers to entry to do good journalism. I think that if we see, and when we see good journalism out there, it's still the same. We notice it. We appreciate it. It gets consumed. It's valuable. But it's a different model that's much more risky than being able to just pump out quick, shallow, fast things for a very quick return, and then just trying to keep that ball rolling.
And it's a disservice. So that was one of the things too, back to just sort of Delphi. And I don't want to I know you've got all sorts of stuff going on, but coming back to the Delphi thing, is that I think there was, from what I gather, the sense of almost like it got to a Lord of the Fliesy kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, by the end it absolutely did. When we first got started in Delphi, I was really, really proud of everybody in the line, because the circumstances were such that it was, and it felt deliberate. Like, it really did feel like this was a kind of deliberate triangulation on the part of the judge to try to get people to be at each other's throats, to put my self-interest ahead of the interests of everybody else in the line. I'm going to throw elbows to get my spot, that type of thing. And we really didn't do that. We were able to come together and be very cooperative and come up with ourselves, like, okay, what do we think a fair system is going to be for deciding who's going to be able to get in and who isn't, and then abiding by that and helping each other and enforce that and stuff. But definitely, as time went on, and as the stakes got higher and higher, that did start to break down. And as the implications of that access became both more valuable, because I think more eyes, as things picked up, just more people start paying attention. You're not sure how it's going to turn out. You're much closer to the climax of the story. People are paying more attention. But also, like you're pointing out, there are interests. There are interests in messaging and in deciding what version of events gets out there and what doesn't. And so it certainly seemed plausible to me that some of what we were seeing in the final days was an attempt to interfere with,
I believe it 100%.
The ability of those of us who are trying to just present what's happening. And sure, I'll give you my opinion about it, but you can take it or leave it. I'm really here to try to give you the facts about the situation. That was valuable to the people who didn't, that was threatening to the people who didn't want the information. They just want the narrative. They want the narrative.
Right.
And so things like, so the rules for access to the courtroom is wild. You had to be in line outside, right? And so the line started forming earlier and earlier and earlier as time went on. It finally got to the point where, like, you would need to walk out of the courthouse in the evening after the conclusion of the session, get yourself in line, stay there overnight, to be able to get in the next day. Where I had line sitters, I had people step up to volunteer to sit in the line for me, which is, I'm still to this day, I'm so incredibly grateful to, and just kind of overwhelmed that they did that. it's hard to sort of express what that means to me, like the expression of the value that they got from what I was doing, that they were willing to take on that kind of hardship and stuff. It really was amazing. But then also we would have to leave the courtroom for lunch, and then at a certain point they decided we're going to reform the line during lunch. So if you get out of the courtroom at lunchtime and there's already a line down there, we know there's a fixed number of seats in the courtroom. If those seats are already taken, you're not getting back in. And so it started to get gamed. People started finding ways to make sure that they were going to protect their own access to that courtroom potentially at the expense of other people's. So it did. It just got wild. And then, of course, by the time it came down to the verdict, and when the verdict was to be announced, that's when the line fell apart, and we had high profile members of the media.
You can
Hi, Dateline producers, both of you. Just decided the rules didn't apply to them anymore. They were going to go to the front of the line. I also specifically call out Max Lewis frequently because he was not that. He was the antithesis of that. Max Lewis was like the OG. He was the guy. He treated everybody who was there like they were on equal footing. He didn't act like he was better than us, like he had more of a right to be there than us, or anything like that. He respected the system and everybody else's rights. So yeah, Max was awesome in that whole process. But yeah, by the end, the Dateline producers, now they're in it for themselves and forget these rules because nobody can enforce them anyway. It's just something that we voluntarily come up with. And so that really was sort of the Lord of the Flies moment. When it all fell apart. And
I don't know how you held it together. I would have. Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, it's just that had to be. And the thing is, I think that it's interesting is I do absolutely believe that this was all, you mentioned it before, and I want to pick back up on it. I think this was by design. And I think Nick and Fran and, all of these people had a vested, who was benefiting from it. It was the state. And I think people, and that's the thing that pisses me off so badly is like, when did we start trusting our government? When did we start letting them, so it's just, and I don't know what the recourse is here. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, it's like, well, shit, now we're looking at a situation where a man whose counsel obviously still believes deeply in his factual innocence, right? Is now so we've seen all the facts, and I do not understand anybody.
We have not seen all the facts.
Okay, sorry. We've seen all the facts that we're being allowed to, right?
Yes, exactly. That the court and the state have decided we should see.
Well, exactly. And I'm like, somebody needs to approach the Allens and say, this all belongs to you. So let's start getting it out into the public. All of the exhibits. Let's start letting that go, because they're not going to do it if it's a public exhibit and there's no preclusion to getting it out there, right? Let's start doing that. Where's the video? Because the thing is that you're right. We don't have all the information. What we have, though, is based on a person sitting and looking at this and going in this objectively. I didn't know. I didn't really have an opinion, but man, it didn't take long to figure out, like, at the very least, this man did not get I mean, going back to the safekeeping, and I started calling it a rendition. Frankly, at this point, a rendition.
That's pretty apt.
So, but my point is, so now, usually when you see the state do their victory tour, it's a victory tour versus what they're doing now. And that to me is very telling. And again, this is kind of coming off the rails, but to me, that's where I start sniffing around more. So I'm like, this is not rocket science, but obviously it feels like there's something more there. So that's when I start to, like, write Nick McClellan incessantly, call the OIG of Indiana, state of Indiana, saying, hey, what are your ISP troopers doing? So that's where journalists can really, it's not the end, right?
Mhm.
People see it as an end to the story. To me, it's like, no, it's like this continuation of not only what went wrong, and who needs to be held accountable, but also
Mhm.
what's happening from here on out,
Yeah.
and I think that's critical.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think it's very telling that that the state has had to kind of go out and continue to litigate the case in the court of public opinion. I mean, I do. I'm not here to try to pat myself on the back or anything like that. A lot of people contributed a lot to getting this story out there. But I think the reality is that was unexpected. We were a little bit of a curveball, because had we not been able to get all of this information out there, people wouldn't have formed their own opinions about
right,
what was going on in that courtroom. And so
right,
then you're just much more captive to whatever version of events it is that that the people who have an interest in you believing a certain version of events versus the people who just want you to know what the information is and be able to think about it and make up your minds for yourselves. That's the problem. It comes down to control, and that's what's particularly frightening to me, particularly seeing that, anytime I see that from the government, anytime I see the government, that's the nature of what it is. The government is to control people. But we've always had a tension with that. It's always been a compromise. It's always been something that's negotiated with the population, with our own consent.
right,
At least in theory, we vote for the restrictions that we want to undertake, so that we can have the best society for everybody.
right.
So when you have a government coming down and using these types of tools to try to control what people believe, to try to control what the truth is, it's just that's very frightening to me. That is absolutely not the world that I want to live in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, I think that what I'm seeing at least come out of Delphi, and I do think that, there were so many people that over the years have been trying to scream about that, about what was going on. And I
Mhm.
think this plays itself out over, I mean, it's not just Delphi, right? We know
Mhm.
this. It's like
Mhm.
beyond that. So when somebody can come in with a platform like the Bob, or whoever you watch, right? And be
Mhm.
able to at least just sit there and very, very diligently report out what's going on, that that's gold, and that helps other people. And see, that to me,
Mhm.
it's like, that is the work of journalism, right? So that part of it is pulling out the factual basis. There's not enough of it. There's not a lot of it. I do think that there's some models out there that have been tried, nonprofit, regional journalism. But again, it's like there's so many things going on. It's like so
Mhm.
much going here and there. But I do think that the law tube phenomenon has been fascinating. I didn't even,
Mhm.
I mean, within like the last 2 months, I mean, this is, again, I'm like, people watch YouTube.
I know, isn't it crazy? Isn't that unbelievable? People watch a lawyer sit on a YouTube channel and talk for hours and hours about the
Right.
nerdiest stuff, and they love it.
I know. I'm like, can we talk about the latest filing and the motion to correct? I'm like, yes, God. It's like, oh, talk.
See,
But yeah,
what captured my attention about this was way back in the early days when I was just starting to do commentary, and I was my key focus was the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, and I was like I was an early arrival to that one, not on YouTube, but out on Twitter. There weren't a
mm,
whole lot of lawyers that were watching it at the time. I started watching it right around the time it was at trial in the UK. So by the time couple more years rolls around, we're going to trial in
oh, like,
Virginia. Like,
that's
I
right. Yeah, I
already
don't know
know
anything.
what's going on. I already know what the evidence is going to be. I've already been following the process. So that's kind of where I started building up my following, I guess, and just getting a feel for how I could contribute to people having a better understanding of these cases, because people were fascinated with this case, and they would see these pretrial filings come in, and they wonder, what does this mean? Does this what's the significance? Is the case going to get thrown out? Is somebody going to get sanctioned? And so it was just a great opportunity for me to be able to explain, here's what it means, and here's what I think the likely outcome is going to be. And I'll tell you, like, what absolutely cemented for me that this market is wild. Like, people are absolutely fascinated in what lawyers know and how they think about cases and how it plays out in these types of processes. I wrote like maybe a 30 tweet thread about emotional case.
I'd love threads like that.
Collateral estoppel. Okay, like a 30 tweet thread about collateral estoppel. You probably don't even know what that means.
No, I actually do. Yes. No, I mean, yeah, you had me at estoppel. Yeah. No, for sure.
Well, it just had to do with the fact that they'd already had this trial in the UK, and so Amber Heard's trying to say, well, you don't get to retry it in the US. You already had your shot at litigating it in the UK. And Johnny's saying, you weren't even a party to the UK, and I didn't get discovery against you in the UK. So I got to just kind of explain to everybody, take this thing that they see it hit the court docket, and it's just intimidating, and it's unfamiliar, and they don't know what it means, and just being able to clarify it and spell it out, and give people kind of some comfort that you can make sense out of this. It's a foreign language, but you can learn the foreign language, and I'll help you translate it. Right. It is. It's a very technical process, this practice of law. And there is, I've just found such a hunger for that so many folks have to be able to understand it on a more deep level.
And I think that, one of the things too, it's like and I probably mentioned it, we had a robust Google Doc share, which was nice, where we talked about, just going back and forth about some of the thoughts that we had. And one of the things that I was like, true crime to me, it's like the genre, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, and this might just be me in the way that I'm wired, but, all of my reporting had to do with crime. Some of it wasn't terribly sexy because it was related to government waste. Yay, right? Who cares? But it's still, so I think the way that it's been sort of taken up, and I don't know. I don't sense that is depreciating what LawTube is doing, though. I think it's decimated my career, not my career, but you know what I mean. There's always it's a different thing where it doesn't have an impact necessarily on, thank goodness, I think, on people doing the LawTube stuff, but true crime podcasts that are predicated on nonsense and basically arms of the state are problematic. And when that takes the place of, and I saw this in Indiana, and I still see it in Indiana, is that all of the information the state information has been provided through a very narrow, very weird outlet, and it's sort of like this, it's like, wow, it's not great. So do you think you're going to keep following it, like all the latest filings? And there's
absolutely.
And there's rumors there's rumors at least that there's going to be even more filings. And I continue to see things being reported just fact-free. I did like a whole screed on it the other day because I was just so frustrated at the way that things were being reported from Nick McClelland's mouth hole as truth. And I'm like, wow, we're just reinventing the entire totality of what's happening here. And the burden shift, right? And just sort of this, like, I don't know. What do you want to, is there anything that I don't want to keep you around. We kind of, I mean, I feel like I could pick your brain about all sorts of stuff. Do you have,
I'm here.
no, I know, but I'm just
in any hurry.
no, one of the things I found interesting is, again, Nerd Central. I don't know if you looked at this or not, but I enjoy myself a deeply researched poll. And there was a poll from Pew Research that I had shared that people that get where people get their information, right? And maybe like 10 years ago, it was people were getting it from their local news affiliate, right? Your mom and dad pulled up in front of the TV trays watching the news. And that's, still kind of a thing. But one of the things I saw in this study, and I posted a bit to a chart, is that most people, 77% of the people, and I don't have the methodology for this polling, but 77% of the people that get information about regional and local crime get it or trust it from their local law enforcement directly. And I'm like, yikes.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've read the number of police reports that I've read, that would be horrifying.
But even to me, I'm like, so, and is this happening on Facebook? Is it because I do know that a lot of the local stuff has gone to Facebook and people are, listening to, or subscribing to the actual, it's almost like there's a direct main line of law enforcement information that you can literally mainline if you want to. And 77% of people this found, were like, well, it's reliable. And it's like, oh, wow. There's just this gulf where it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean that people are getting that information from law enforcement about local crime reporting? And I'm like,
yeah, it is. And it's fascinating too, because I think, I look at it kind of in levels. You have the people that listen to the news report, and the news is sourced to maybe there's a press conference that a chief of police is giving on the courthouse steps or whatever. So that's the source of the information. That's kind of one level of getting information. Maybe you want to go deeper than that. So you go ahead and just cut out the reporter. You go ahead and listen to the police scanner yourself, you know, and then there's this sense of like, well, I'm getting more direct, more objective information. No, it's still the police there.
Right.
In that perspective. So it is ironic. I mean, law enforcement is extremely powerful. They always have been. They've had a massive lobby, a political lobby, a public messaging lobby for a long time. I don't really see that changing. I mean, one of the things that I've kind of always been aware of, but I feel like the Karen Reed case in particular has really sort of brought a little bit more attention to, is the money. The money side of law enforcement and the law enforcement career, and kind of the way that you game the system to get that retirement that, with law enforcement, you typically get it fairly early, maybe 20 years. A lot of other professions, you might have to work a lot longer before you get to retire. The amount that's paid to law enforcement, the way that they can game that, to blow up their last final years of service to get a higher retirement pension. It's high money. It's high money game in law enforcement. And people don't really realize that. I'm the first one to say not all cops are bad. Far from it. I've been very fortunate in my career that I've been able to work mostly with departments I consider pretty good departments, and cops I consider pretty good cops. Most of them, in my experience, have gone into the profession because they want to help people, and they do their best. That said, there's always bad apples in any department. There's always going to be bad apples. And there's always going to be just systemic issues with how law enforcement works, how the rules are structured, and all of that type of thing. Just the very nature of the relationship of policing, that's going to create some issues with it. So, I always try to make that clear. Like, I'm not anti-cop at all. Like, if I criticize law enforcement and criticize law enforcement messaging and stuff
Right.
like that. It's not because I hate individual cops or even think that we shouldn't have cops. Like, I'm not an abolitionist at all. I'm
It's like,
pretty
Yeah.
in favor of having the rule of law, and police are really essential to that. But they have to meet a standard just like the rest of us do. It's such a critical function that they play in our society. They have so much power. We put so much trust in them that it's important to hold them to account, just like any other form of government.
Yes, absolutely.
We got to monitor them and make sure that they're not stepping out of line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting. There was a case, it's a Supreme Court case, and I didn't realize this a few years ago. It's from Castle Rock in Colorado, and it's about the cops do not have a duty to respond.
None. None. They have no obligation to you whatsoever. If you call the police and you're like, I'm being murdered in my house, and they're like, great, have a good time, never show up. They have no responsibility to anybody at all.
I think it's fascinating. And that case, what was it? It's not Garcia. Is it Gonzalez? Something versus Castle Rock or something like that.
Yeah, I forget the name too, but it
was a horrible case. It was a horrible case. There was, and 3 little girls were killed by their father. It's like, and to see that, it's like, holy crap, there really is no. It makes keeping them in check even more important, because they don't really have a duty. Now, again, obviously there's, I'm sure, local things, this and that, but overall, no, the Supreme Court says you really don't. And that's only one aspect of the system, right? And that's the entry point, and they're just happen to be loud and in your face. But
well, and this is why, like, media plays a really important role. They can play such an important role in accountability. And I'll give you a really good example. Like, one of the beefs I talk about on my channel all the time is dirty prosecutors. You have dirty prosecutors that hide evidence, that elicit false testimony. They do all this underhanded stuff because they're more interested in winning than they are in doing justice in our courts. And this is plainly against the Constitution and the rules that we operate in the court system. And so occasionally they do get caught, and convictions get reversed and people get new trials. And of course you can't get like 30 years of your life in prison back. But there's at least some sort of semblance of trying to rectify the wrong that's been done. But one of the things that you almost never see in that type of situation, you almost never see the prosecutor who did all this stuff so much as even being named. You hardly ever even see their name. It's just, the prosecutor did this or the prosecutor did that. And so what happens? They break the rules, they cut the corners, they commit the injustices so that they can build up their record, and it benefits them politically, and they'll get promoted, and they'll have a long and successful career on the backs of all of these people that they have abused along the way to get there, and the trust that they have violated in order to get there. So that's an opportunity where, if the press, the media, the journalists wanted to like be real helpful at helping keeping folks accountable, get the names out there. That's out there in public record. There was a very recent Supreme Court decision that you might have heard of, the Glossop decision. We talked about it.
I think it's going to come back around in Delphi. The Napui claim, there's a lot of interesting stuff that could come out of that. But go ahead.
Well, I bring it up because so the Glossop decision was a case from the U.S. Supreme Court that reversed a man's conviction because the prosecutor had knowingly elicited false testimony, and it broke the pattern. It actually named prosecutor Connie Smotherson.
What was it?
Who back in the early 2000s, and engaged in all of these shenanigans. And it's been 20 years. So what's happened? She's gone on and had a successful career. And in fact, as we speak right now, she is an adjunct professor at the University of Oklahoma Law School. And so
I'm writing this down.
What's the consequence of her name being made public through this court opinion? Well, you have now petitions that are being circulated, and actions that are being taken by the students at the University of Oklahoma Law School to try to remove this person from the faculty. That this is not somebody who should be in a position of leadership and mentorship with students when you have that type of record. So that's how accountability is done, and that's the way that information can play such an important role in making sure there are consequences for this type of thing, and that they're negative consequences, not just you'll be able to overlook it and go on and have career benefits and never think twice about the injustice that you perpetrated.
And I hope that there are consequences. I would be interested, and see, this is why I like reading Supreme Court filings, because that table of authorities, right? When you go through and you list, a lot of times there are articles from newspapers, and a couple of mine, I was stunned to find over the years, have been cited in a couple of different Supreme Court cases from specific work that I was doing. So I think that, so my point is, I'm going to go back now and look and see what Oklahoma, because they have a pretty robust nonprofit, and it's pretty new, so it's probably going back before that, to see who is doing the reporting on this. Because if it took a Supreme Court case to get this woman out there, I'm just interested to see how long the local media had to struggle before, well, in the whole system, right? So I'm viewing this again from my perspective. I'm like, I wonder how many I wonder how many people were writing about this. One of the things in Oklahoma I've been working on is, there's no accountability for medical examiners. And there's but that's part of the criminal legal system as well, because, it's like when you have a medical examiner who's standing there, like in Karen Reed, with, cops standing over. Now, it was different in this case with Officer O'Keefe. The medical examiner stood her ground, but people, I don't even think, realize of that exchange and that sort of pressure that is facing medical examiners, and that medical examiners go bad, and that's a whole part of the system that's completely broken as well, and is subject to talk about money and federal funding and big grants and get your lab built up. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. Now, again, try to find people that are interested in pitching that story, in taking that story on. Few and far between. So, but I am thrilled to hear that. Now I've got to go and look this woman up, because
Connie Smotherton. Let me say it a couple more times. I'm pretty sure it's
is it SM? But that's good. So that's why I want to say Nick McClellan, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Adam Lally, Hank Brennan. What are you doing, buddy?
There have been a couple times where I've raised prosecutorial misconduct, of course, on appeal in my own legal practice more than once. And I've typically make it a point to name the prosecutor. So far, I don't think I've been successful, except for one time in getting the prosecutor named. But there's actually a law review article that I will footnote very frequently in this context, and it's I forget the exact title, but it's the effect of it is naming and shaming. Like, if you're going to create disincentives for this behavior, there has to be some type of public disavowal of it, and the best way to do that is to attach shame to it. Make people embarrassed to be caught at this, and you'd be shocked at how quickly people will stop doing it.
Well, it's like sanctioning, right? I mean, so it's the same thing, and it's like the same thing. You and I had pointed out, some of the bad journalism at Rolling Stone with the lacrosse story, with the plagiarism stuff at New York Times. A lot of times, calling those things out as they typically don't go on to have a great career. Now, some of them fail straight on up until they're found out, but it's the same idea. more grave consequences, obviously, in the prosecutorial space. And I will actually say this out loud, but I do know some good prosecutors that do use prosecutorial discretion, that used to be public defenders and guardian ad litems and went into prosecution because they saw how screwed up the prosecution was in their county or whatever. So, and I've seen a little, they call it progressive prosecutors, which again, why put a label? It just, whatever. But so there does seem to be some of that. And I'm like, it's going to take some of that as well as the ongoing excavation of what's really going on the ground, you know, and these egregious cases, but it happens all the time. And maybe not with such grand effect or whatever, but this kind of stuff happens all the time. You know, why do people plead guilty? Think about the trajectory of the plea bargain as we've gone through history, you know, all of these things. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think, I mean, is there anything, I'm trying to look through my thing.
I have a question I have for you that I would love to get your insight on, because of course like I've said, I've been very, very critical of legal journalism for quite a long time. I've had my say about what I think they do wrong and the mistakes they make and so forth. I would love to hear from you. Where is LawTube messing up? Is there anything that we're doing that we could learn from journalists and that we could improve the way that we're trying to provide information and education and so forth?
You know, I think that that's an interesting question. I think that, hear me out, is, you know, I think that there's room for collaboration across, you know, and not turning something into infotainment. My thing is that learning from, you know, finding a journalist that is actually doing the work, that is actually seeking to do some of the same things. Like, you know, you throw me the name of a bad prosecutor and I'm on it, right? So, but the thing is, you have to but what I'm saying is, so if you want to expand beyond that, I think one of the things is, you know, and I think you do a good job. I think, I'm trying to think of other, you know, providing resources for people, right? But I also think try to not be. Listen, like I said, journalists get a terrible rap, but I am here to say that a lot of what you're doing is the work of journalism. And one of the things I told you and this is kind of onto your color commentary thing, you know, when I said to you that fair and balanced is a tagline, right? And I think that people need to be disabused of that. And I think that because I'm biased as hell, but I'm also
everybody is. Every human being on the planet is.
But I'm also your best. You want me on your jury is the way that I think about it, right? Because I'm able to take in new information. And I think there's a lot more journalists. Maybe it's generational. I don't want to think that it is, but you know, I do think that embracing that the bias that's inherent in all of us and just sort of wearing it, you know, I think that's great, because I think that the idea that somehow everybody's just, oh, fair and balanced. There's no two good sides to the Richard Allen story. How am I going to report on that fair and balanced, right? Why should we shouldn't expect that from lawyers, right? But I do think too, naming and shaming on so I'm happy to call out terrible journalists, and I have Murder Sheet. But you know, and this is something that I don't think that lawyers maybe are necessarily as comfortable. There's some terrible actors. In that creator space or whatever that are doing just disservice. And sometimes, you know, and it is the age-old problem of getting uncomfortable. And again, like, I don't know what the ethics of, you know, my brothers and sisters in law, you know, there's sort of that collegiality.
But
Whereas,
it's a cultural thing. It's not like a rule. It's not like, you know, we have First Amendment rights too. We get
yeah,
to have opinions, and ultimately, our main objective is supposed to be, as lawyers, as part of our ethics, is to increase confidence in the justice system. And so, if you're not calling out bad actors, you're not calling out bad information,
mhm.
uh, you're not serving that.
Right, right. And I think that, so, and I think that I think a lot of people perceive that as picking a fight. I don't.
Mhm, mhm,
You know, that's my job as a that
mhm,
to me at least, I'm not, there's good journalists and there's bad journalists. There's slimy lawyers, there's tremendous lawyers.
mhm,
But, you know, my job is, as my history and being a, like, part of like watchdog journalism, that's my job. And if it happens to
mhm,
be journalists or so-called journalists doing it, it's even
mhm,
worse. It's like pointing your finger at the, you know, it's better to come from inside your own industry. So I think
mhm,
people, at least from what I've heard, have been appreciate like a person that has been doing this for a long time, and for better or worse has like bona fides, whatever they are, right? I've written for some
mhm,
great outlets. Great. But it does give me that sort of ability to be very critical of my own, you know, and I would argue some of these people I complain about aren't even journalists, but I think law too, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
you can, so I think if that's something that, and I don't see, you know, the naming and shaming thing is beautiful. Like what you're doing, and you know, if you see a terrible defender, right? If you see a terrible public defender doing
mhm,
whatever, I think that, that's part of it. But I do think that, you know, I think it's invaluable, but then again, I'm
mhm.
just such a nerd. So I don't know. But there must be tons of nerds out there because you have so many people, Bob, lawyerly, you know,
More nerds
Runkle,
than I ever could have dreamed
Runkle.
of.
I know, so many nerds. But the thing is, it's like, and one of the things I find is people are hungry to figure out, well, what can we do? What can we
Mhm,
do? You know, and so I've been trying to help people figure out how to write even editorials, right? So
mhm,
get hyper local.
mhm,
I don't know what that looks like for law too, but I think that
mhm,
just the process and the painstaking level of explaining things and
mhm,
even digging into that passion. I think it's impossible to be dispassionate about something that you feel very strongly about. So
mhm.
does that answer any of your
Yeah, I
questions?
think you've given me a lot of stuff to think about. More accountability, um, and more call outs. And
I think it's okay though, but I
no,
think that
no, you're right. What you're getting at is there is a little bit of a culture of being comfortable, and it's, you know, part of having an authentic approach is recognizing when you don't like something and being willing to simply say that.
mhm,
Um, and that can get uncomfortable, like you're saying, when you get in situations where, you know, maybe you're dealing with relationships and the whole political side of how people relate to each other and stuff like that. So um, definitely take that to heart. And helping people do something, finding
right,
ways to help people do something with the information that we're providing. I definitely noticed that too with Delphi. I had so many people contact me wanting to know, you know, what can I do, how can I make a difference. And
right,
it can be so hard sometimes, uh, especially with the court process, because like we are almost kind of helpless in some ways. Like I don't know that there's much that we can do to fix this particular situation, but what we can do and what I can do, I can help people recognize where there are structural failings here, where this isn't just a matter of let's go in and fix one thing and the problem goes away.
Right.
It's that here are all these problems that are contributing to why this happened. And so let's figure out how to tackle that. Let's look at how these rules in the courts for who gets access to the recordings of the court hearings. Let's look at the process of how those rules get made, and then we can think about what sort of steps we can take to maybe address that. Okay, those rules are made by the judges. The judges are appointed by the legislature. So now we know who has the power over who fills that role. We know how to contact them. We know how to communicate to them. You know, this is the problem that I see. This is what needs to be done, you know, to keep this from being a bigger problem in the future.
I forget I have a chat. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, you guys. I'm like sitting here. Yep. But this is a good question. Can people other than jail? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, 100%. I mean, for the people that have come out of the woodwork, literally over Delphi, to me, it is those tools. It is, you know, I even have like a Google Drop that has like, here's an example of the FOIA letters that I craft. Here's an example of the, you know, the way that I deal with a public prosecutor when I was pursuing X, Y, and Z, and just give sort of, and it may not. And I think too, is that a lot of it is, you know, being able to, it's hard. You want it, a lot of times people want to see that change immediately and see it immediately. And some of it, you know, some of it maybe is immediate, but it is, there's also people that really just want to be able to participate. And they're like, how do I participate in this crazy ass situation, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
for sure.
That's really encouraging. That is encouraging. Let me see. I haven't even looked at this. I'm sorry. Like I said, I don't really do this. Do you see anything in there? Are you able to scroll?
I have not been scrolling a whole lot, but I can certainly go and scroll back.
Well, I just didn't know if anybody, yeah, I didn't know if anybody, I think everybody's being nerds and corroborating nerd. Oh, there's Osbrook.
Oh, what's up? A technician.
Okay. Technically, you're a nerd, friend.
He's like the highest level nerd that we have. Like one of the highest level nerds that there is.
Yes, he there's an
he's like wonk level nerd.
Right. He's like, there's nerds, and then there's habeas nerds that are like somehow hovering above us, right? But that's another thing too. Embrace the nerd, right? I mean,
yeah,
I'm here for it.
And that's one thing I'll always be grateful to Emily D. Baker for. You know, she's obviously one of the most prominent figures and voices and stuff in the LawTube sphere. And she has fully leaned into the nerds, and her audience has leaned into that. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
I think she, you know, and honestly, I would love to see more people that have been in the prosecution space jump the fence and start talking about what because I do dabble in that space too. I'm like hearing her perspective where she's just like, this is absolutely unacceptable. And I don't think people get that either. There is prosecutorial discretion, but yeah. So anyway, everybody, what else? I mean, I feel like we could just have, one of the things I wanted to say is that when I saw your original action and I saw you sign it, I'm like, holy shit, we're both Andrea Jeans.
That is funny. who calculate those odds for me? Like,
I'm like,
wait a minute. I literally I was doing an article on my Substack this morning because some new evidence came out in the Koberger case, DNA evidence. It gets very, very complicated with how the statistical results get reported. And so I did this piece to kind of explain the significance of what was out there, because there's a big distinction between something being rare and something being unique. So Andrea Jean is probably pretty rare. Like if you put all of the possible name combinations in a Yahtzee jar and put them out on the table, what are the odds that you're going to get Andrea Jean? Pretty low, but that doesn't mean there's only one Andrea Jean in the world.
That's the DNA analogy.
Each other.
Well, and I listed your Substack also because I pulled out, your critique, your criticism, and I think rightfully so, your criticism of legal journalism. But I put your Substack down there, and I did see that because I am subscribed to your Substack. But I think it's for people like me who still read, which I think is another thing that's difficult.
Long form is dying. Long form is dying.
It's been dead, but anyway, so yes, I posted that link in this, and you're obviously all over the law tubes. And what is there anything that I got to put my cheaters on? Here I come, Andrea. Okay, so that's your Substack. Okay, and everybody can just find you at what on the Oh my God, did somebody just give me a super chat? I didn't know I had super chat.
Somebody gave you a super chat.
This has never happened before. Hang on. What? Let's see.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Karen Reed case, Judge Bev is allowing Dr. Crosby in with no Daubert Lanigan hearing. She doesn't even need to. He's qualified on the basis of the Commonwealth showing. Yeah.
I can't.
What can I tell you? Like pseudoscience rules the court. It has for decades. It will continue to. This is like far from the worst thing. I can't. He's probably going to give us some forensic canine odontology. That
is that what this is? Is that thank you, this person, Caruso. I didn't know. I think I had.
Dr. Crosby is the dog bite guy. He's the dog bite guy, and
are you kidding me? He's
a former police officer, and he went to he after he retired, he went and got some kind of degree in like animal. Nobody's really quite sure what it is, but it seems to be like animal behavior related. And what he's done is he has sort of made a career, an expert witness career, out of testifying about kind of the relationship between what you can infer about dog behavior and dog bites. And so you have a situation, he deals a lot with like aggressive animals. And so you have a dog bite situation. Should this dog be put down versus can this dog be rehabilitated?
Right.
And he forms opinions about that basically based on different characteristics of the dog bite. So that's his background. I will grant he's seen a lot of dog bites. And so maybe that's good enough for him to be able to say, oh, I don't think this is a dog bite. But, I'm very skeptical that that's really where the line is going to be drawn in terms of what he does. Just based on the little drips that we've gotten about kind of what's in his report and what he did and things like that.
Did Alessi argue this? Was that Alessi that was arguing against this? Or no. God, I love that man.
And he is wonderful. He is
crush on him.
So impressive. He is so impressive.
Talk about, top-notch nerd. My God. I love a person who's going to tell you what they're going to do, and then they go through how they're going to do it, and then they do it with
and then they tell you they did it.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, people! I didn't realize. I guess I have super chats now. Hey,
congratulations!
What? Does that mean now I have to do this? So we'll see. But thank you, Hammy. Hello. Wow. Okay, so that's unfortunate that.
Yeah.
I'll be very interested to see what happens after the robust hearing from yesterday.
Yes, indeed.
Holy hot crap. That was something else. DB, damn it, getting in here at the end. Thank you. That's hilarious. What else? Anything else? So you're going to be, obviously, Karen Reed has a couple weeks off. right?
Reed's got a couple weeks off. I'm getting caught up on, there's been a whole flurry of stuff that's been filed in Koberger, and I'm still getting caught up on the stuff that was happening while I was gone. I was out of the country for 2 months. And so, you know, a lot of things happened while I wasn't really making a lot of content. So I'm getting caught up on some of that. One of the things that I have in the hopper, and I'm hoping to get out pretty quickly, I promised a deep dive into this portion of the hearing transcript that was recently unsealed in the Koberger case, where Detective Brett Payne testified that the reason, so they discovered unidentified male DNA from blood in 2 different places at the crime scene. One blood sample the banister, and blood on a glove that was found outside. And so these have been unidentified, and essentially the state has done nothing to investigate them. And Brett Payne's explanation for why he didn't do that is because, his understanding is that the way CODIS works is that you can only introduce one suspect. And since they'd already put in Mr. Koberger's DNA and already had him as a suspect, if they put in this new DNA, it would kick out the sample that they'd previously submitted. So
kick out, is that terminology? I mean, kick out? What is that?
I forget exactly the words that he used, but he was essentially saying it would be removed. It would be removed from the database. It replace the one that they had used before. So part of what I'm going to do is just show, everybody I think intuitively knows that doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't, right. And that's not how it works. I'm going to go ahead and show you it's not like this is a, federally run database that has a massive amount of public information already out there about how it operates and what the rules are and so forth. But also I'm going to just give you some thoughts about kind of what it means about Brett Payne and things to pay attention to. Some maybe recommendations that I would have for the defense as far as handling him as a witness. And so that I'm working on. That'll be out on Substack, like I said, hopefully soon. We had a little bit of chaos come up at my house. I mentioned to you.
Yes.
We had a big water line break out in the front yard. Just yesterday, we had a big lake out in the front yard. So I'm going to have excavators and stuff out there digging out my front yard, probably starting tomorrow until they can get that fixed. But anyway, so there's a little bit of chaos I'm working around that has messed up my workflow a little bit.
You mean life?
So I never make promises about when I'm going to get things done until I'm absolutely positive, that's going to happen. So anyway, forthcoming, a lot of other stuff that I'm looking at in the meantime. Like I said, lots going on in Koberger. Boy, now I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head about what all am I looking at?
That's a lot. And now, are the chickens okay?
Chickens are wonderful. Chickens are great. Chickens are doing just fine. Jeff took excellent care of the chickens while I was gone. Getting more eggs from them now as the days are getting longer. So
I'm a big chicken fan. So I was I caught part of your stream yesterday when you were featuring your friend's art and the chicken coop. I loved it.
Yeah. Those poor birds. I didn't. I'll be very frank with you. The Wyandottes, I didn't really mind so much. I don't like the Wyandottes. They're bitchy. They're just not very. They're not very nice chickens. But I did lose a little Americana, and that made me very sad. The Americanas are just, they're real friendly. They're real nice birds. And so I am hoping to get some more Americanas this spring, but they can be a little bit hard to find. So cross your fingers for me. And if you get a line on some Americanas,
listen,
let me know.
I know some chicken people in Iowa. My niece has chickens. So it's she's your backyard chicken gal. So she's all over it, but
perfect.
Yeah. Let me see here. Oh, thank you guys so much. I don't know John. No, I don't know.
John Juka, is that a wrongful conviction case? I feel like that name rings a bell.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to write it down. I mean, I go back through the chats too, y'all, just so you know. So if I'm missing you, I go back through and try to respond if I can, because I like to.
Here it is. He got his conviction for college students' murder was overturned last year, but he remains behind bars. This is back from 2019. That's old news.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. I know it rings a bell. I just don't remember the details of it exactly off the top of my head. So I can go in and look that up.
Criminality. Oh my God. Okay. Let's see what's this. No. Look at that.
Yep, you're done now. You're done.
Wow. Let's see. Well, thank you. Will you do this again with me?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'd love to.
I'm, journalists, we get a bad rap, but we can be all right.
Yes, you do. But so do lawyers,
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Over here, like, who am I to throw stones? I'm a lawyer of all people.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I do hope that we, can do this again. And again, slide me any information on any bad prosecutors. I'm happy to dig into it for you.
I'd love to.
That. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. I'm going to stay on 1 second. I'll just remove. You can go. There she goes. All right. Thank you guys so much. And let's see. I wanted to let Andrea go. She has a Ellen Greenberg. Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We ended up speaking for, I could have kept going, but hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully, striking a blow for good journalists and good lawyering out there. Let me see. Hang on 1 second. 1 moment, please. Oh, Lord. Okay. Sounds good. All right. I've got to go get my cat. Thank you guys so much. Super chat. For some reason, I forgot. I don't know. There's things I need to learn. And thank you, R&M. She for being a moderator. I'm like, hey, I guess I'm trying to figure this out. Yeah. Andrea Jeans for the win. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And let me know what questions. I think most of you know how to get in touch with me. You can always leave a comment. That's great. And my email is in my little bio thing. Yeah, so thanks, y'all. I really, really appreciate it. And let me just make sure I got everybody from the super chat. That was so great, you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Ooh, thank you, Chelsea. We got that one. Awesome. And thank you so much, Dr. Vonda. Love you. And I love you. I love your question on Twitter. I have to get back to you about that. But yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I am going to end scene. Okay. More soon. All right. I hate you guys the least. Okay.